Okay, so let's continue with this is the part 2 of chapter 1. So let's continue with it. So then the part 1, we spoke about the fact that part 1, chapter 1, we spoke about uh, the business environment, which is we know that when we do a business or business growth and job creation, will be caused, there is an environment involved with it, which is had to be taken into consideration. And one of them is the economic environment, which is we talked about income and expenditures. We spoke about currency shift, whether the price is going up or down for the dollar that you have, and the economic system is there is a growth or is there a shift down, recessions, and all these things. We spoke about the technology in technological environment. Is there is enough, equipment, machineries, or IT? We talked about the the database, the information that you need, and definitely the internet can help so much. And the business growth and job creation depend also on the social environment. Diversity, demographic change is the age, whether this society is aging or made of lots of young people, and the family changes, whether the family is still made of 1 or 2 people, dependent, or 6, 7, as we have in the Middle East and Asia. Um, and the competitive environment, because there is a local competitions and the international as a component of competition. We'll talk each one separately more in details. Customer driven organization structures, and then we have the legal. How high is the tax, the or low, the tax laws, the contract laws, whether there is a contracts. Require a local partner or not, and uh, how corrupt or not corrupt is the business that you environment of the business that you need to work on it, and all will be working influenced by whether there is a free trade, there is a global competition, if there is a global business environment involved in it, and the quality imperative of our products and services. So here when we talk about the legal environment, which is part of, as we said here, is this part, the legal environment. So in the legal environment, there is something called a regulation. The restriction that provincial and federal laws place on a business with respect to the conduct of their activities. And we notice lots of businesses, some of the businesses has shifted from a more restrict environment, legals, to less restrict ones. Uh, you know, Such as examples of a sweatshops, it's legal in, for example, in China or probably in Bangladesh or in Vietnam, in comparison with the Canadian businesses. So they exist to both to protect consumers and businesses. These regulations that doesn't have to, you know, just against the business, could be a good for the business. The government encourage business through lowering the taxes, as you know, and regulation affecting the contracts. You want to deal in a business environment where it's clear what you're supposed to do, what's in it for you, what's in it for other, and there is a government who can protect your rights. Um, there is no, you need minimum corruption. There is less illegal activities, and both, as we said, domestically and internationally. Then what we have, as we said, the economic environment, which is, if you look at it here, the economic environment. And in the economic environment, it's about probably looks at the income of that country or these people, the expenditures, and the resource that affect the cost of running a business. Economic indicators usually, how do you know if there is consumer spending? And we probably going to take in the economic micro or macroeconomics. Once the consumer starts spending, the business start booming. Less spending, the business going, the economic environment going through a recession. We look at the employment levels, how high, if it's high employment level, then the country is in a good shape. And we look at the productivity, how productive each employee or each organization or each unit. The other thing that we look at is a currency fluctuation affect the import and export and operation in general. A lower Canadian, for example, a lower Canadian dollar relative to the US dollars makes our export in Canada cheaper to the US. Our products cheaper to the US. Therefore, it is positively impacting the companies because the Canadian company can produce because the consumption is higher, and that produce goods and service for the export. When the Canadian dollar is high relatively to US dollars, our export become more expensive to Americans, therefore losing their competitive edge, and the American will buy less Canadian product because it's more expensive. So the dollar level has effect on the export and import. On the other hand, the more expensive Canadian dollars make the product of American products or the international product is cheaper for the Canadians, so they will be buying more products made in China or made in US, something like that. So the price dollars of Canadian dollars is very important to stay at, to make the export more attractive. The other thing that the entrepreneurship is promoted by usually government because lots of income generated by the entrepreneurs, by the government, by allowing the private ownership of business, but not all countries allow the private ownerships, for example. Then one of the other environment that we spoke about it is the technological environment. Please don't make a mistake with IT. IT is part of the technology. If you have a regular, chainsaw is a different than if you have a stronger and faster electronic or with a gas chainsaw can cut more tree. It's you have a better technology to cut trees, for example. So technology is everything from phone and copiers to computers to mobile devices to medical imaging machines and then various software programs and apps that makes the business more effective, efficient, and productivities. So machineries plus the is part of the technologies also. Now we look at also in the technological environment, we look at the productivities also, the amount of the output that is generated giving the amount of input, hours of work. If you come to the farms in Canada, you will see a big land where the 2 people or 3 people only work with it. The same land, same size of the land, and they produce more. And in the same size of the land, if you go to a third world country, it runs by 100 people and produce less. So the productivity is very important. The higher productivity means employers needs, first of all, the fewer work landing to the higher unemployment. Um, there were something that I saw on the internet talks about, um, you know, um, high class, middle class, and lower class, and no class or lazy class. And that's what they're expecting in the future. There would be people who not belong to any class and they don't work. They can be rely on some creative thinking, or they can be rely on the government support. So they are not part of the higher class, high class, middle class, or low class. It's a new add-on class that might be generated in the future when everything runs in a very technological approach. For example, today you had the taxis, have a taxi drivers, and then you eventually with the style of Tesla, probably you see you might not have a taxi drivers anymore in the car without a driver if they are improving. So the taxi drivers becomes unemployed and they might be part of different classes, or they might be having no class, which is they can be supported by the government and other people. And all these things is what we're looking at. Very important is the electronic commerce or the e-commerce. And we notice that there is different categories of the commerce. But what's the e-commerce is the buying and selling of goods and service over the internet. Now we have things that called B2C or business to consumers, which is business to consumers, B2B or business to business when the business selling the other businesses, and e-business is referred or government, G2B, G2C. There are others which is not as focused as B2C, B2B, and there is a C2C also, like KGG, for example. The e-business refers to any information system or application that empowers the business processes. So you have lots of applications these days. They called e-business suite. So they help any information system or application that empowers the business processes. And using technology um, to be responsive to customers. Most of the business, most of the technology is not used for the sake of the technology. So this is where you look how it can be more responsive to the customers. So we need a database, which is an electronic storage files for information. We need tools that identify thefting, especially in the banking system, credit card and debit card, obtain an individual personal information. You don't want somebody takes your personal information, obtaining your SIN number or social insurance number and credit card numbers. People can take these for the illegal purposes. So you need an applications and technology to identify the theft. In Canada also, there is the federal privacy laws have been created, like a do not call list or DNCL. So you as a consumer, individual, not the business, can put your names in this list and no business is allowed to call you, and this it can keep you in a safe. And we can talk about it maybe in the more details, different kind of laws that the Canadian use in Canada, federal laws that help consumers or or the suppliers actually to be more protective. You can protect yourself by restriction whom you give personal information to, installing like virus and anti-spying, anti-phishing softwares, and firewalls on your computers also. You should monitor your credit report on a frequent basis. And banking, there is lots of application insurance also to protect your information. Now, we will talk later on about the ethical issues, whether you should release your personal informations, what kind of information should organization have about you. And you're fully aware of a social media. Some people call it, it's not a social and it's not a media, but there is a social media tools like Facebook, Twitters, blogs, wikis, podcasts. Um, when you use them for marketing and sales, becomes a social media marketing. A whole chapter will be explaining what social media, uh, search optimization, how you do the social media marketing. The most common tool or platform used by both consumers and organizations are social networking sites like we know the Twitters, Facebook, blogs, wikis, podcasts, and other social media sites like YouTube, which is where we are utilizing for delivering some courses. The social networking sites are used to connect and communicate with the current and potential customers. Currently, with the situation with the COVID-19, a huge shift on utilizing the social media. And then what we have something called a crowdsourcing, which is using the expertise of a large group of people to solve a business problem. In the social media, the blogs, or also you might throw a business question or a business dilemma and let the other people discuss it, and you can derive some solution from it. Now, in the competitive part of the environment, you need to look at the components of competition. The entries, how easy to enter, the number of entries, is there is a buyer, a power of buyers, whether it's a monopoly or not, power of suppliers, which is could be monopoly, oligopoly, or perfect competition, uh, existing competition, and might be there is a substitute. Also, you might want to look at it. For example, if you are selling beer, you need to look at your substitute, which is other alcohol, or if you're selling Pepsi, your substitute is Coke, Coca-Cola, for example. Um, Companies compete by exceeding. So how the companies usually compete, and they do compete by exceeding customer expectation, providing something to the customers more than they expect that, and restricting and empowerment, restructuring and empowerment of the employees, end users, which is not the end users, the people who is had no powers within the organization. You contribute some of it to them so they can make a decision to betterment of the company. Empowerment means giving the frontline workers the responsibilities, the authority, and the freedom to respond quickly to the customer request. And you can, these days also, you can utilize some applications like the CRM that can help you to empower your employment. CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. So how competition has changed business, the business itself. Well, we have what you call the traditional and we have the modern one. In the traditional, we look at the usually customer satisfaction, and the marketing department usually one of their goals is looks at the customer satisfaction. With the modern business, you need to do delighting the customer, make them excited, happy. In the traditional, you have what you call the customer orientation. So this becomes old, and now you have the customer and the stakeholder orientations, which is we spoke about the how many stakeholders could be the government, could be the shareholders, could be the environment, and then the tradition we said is a profit orientation. Now is a profit and social orientation. How green? How do you contribute to the environment, to the people in your organization? You notice lots of businesses start doing the social orientation and announce how they're supporting the needy people or how they contribute to more trees, more greeneries, and all these things. And you have a retroactive in the old days. Now you became a proactive, and it was a production oriented, and now the quality and service orientations there. In the old days was the traditional was a managing what's the manager want. Today what's the customer wants. So your what's the customer wants is more important than what's a manager wants. The other thing that we need to look at it, and it's important, is the social environment. The demography, the statistical studies of a human population, age, regard, this is what you have the Canada Census, where they do, it's time now for it. They do, see what kind of people, what's their income, what's their age, male, female, all these things. So the statistical studies of a human population with regard of its size, densities, other characteristics such as age, race, genders, and income can help the business to make decisions. The demographic shift include probably we need to look at the aging population. In 20 years, we might have one fourth of Canadians older. This is why, for example, Canada opened the doors for immigrant to come because they are young, and they can be a feed to this government aging. In Japan, there is lots of aging, and they have facing a problem of aging, minimum of birth. Every family probably generating one child, which is could be a very drastic, very important, very problem, and can be, there's a policies built by the government to do that. In the old days, for example, 20 years ago, if we take a look at Iran, they were pushing for having less children. Now Iran trying to give money to anybody who has any children because it's aging population, and they know in the 20 years they might need more people to produce. So the aging population is important. The change in the workforce is important also. Lots of people moving from blue collars workers to the white collars also is important. The diversity to a growing number of immigrants, and we saw why some countries have the doors widely open for immigrant to come also. Here are some examples that in the Canadian, what's shifting is happening. In 2016, you notice that I think the most important number here is this part and this part. How we gonna manage to contribute to this part? Most of the income generated between 20 to 64, and currently we have that amount percentage and 16.3%. But if you look at for example, in 2036, if it's like this, what are we going to have? One fourth of the Canadians above retirement age, so that they are in an age where government should be spending on them, and the government needs to collect more taxes. So these are solutions that you implant now for the future requirement by the government is done. The other thing that we need to look at it is the global environment. Important of all other environment is influenced due to, for example, increase in the growth of global competitions. Right now, somebody in Bangladesh factory of clothing can compete with the factory of clothing in Mexico and in USA and in Canada because of the increased growth of a global competition due to the free trade probably among the nations. The development of efficient distribution systems, there was more efficient distributions, supply chain management becomes more efficient. The communication, because of the internet, becomes more advanced and improving the level of standard to the globalization. In the old days, we might see a hunger happening in Africa, in India, in Middle East, but these days, because of the globalization and be able to these countries to sell outside the countries and do the trade, we don't see, we see less and less such a phenomena. So how global changes affect you as a business or individual? Businesses expand to serve the global market. Now, when you're in India, you have an IT company, you ask to them, you say, well, they tell you we're supplying certain services to UK, Canada, Australia, or in India. So there is a global market, it's not an individual market. And new jobs are created in both manufacturing, for example, in China, and services industries, for example, more in Canada. The rapid changes created a need for continuous learning. There is a change happening very quickly. Competition becomes more fiercely, so you need more information, and more job opportunity for a graduating student. Definitely, it's happening because you need an educated employers and employees to have a better and more productive organization and companies. The other thing that we need to look at is the ecological environment, which is we see a lot of climate change. We see lots of discussion about disrupting the environment. There is some restriction, some countries less restriction, other countries. And during Trump's time, this came on the surface. Lots of discussion was about it. So the climate change, the movement of the temperature of the planet up or down over time. Some of the current issue is, it says, the global warming, but you know the temperature has been going up recently. So greening is, you know, planting, taking care of a trend of saving energy and producing product that cause less harm to the environment. It's not only planting trees, and greening is also producing product that does not harm the environment. You notice there is one of the issues that Middle East goes through is desertations. And the desert is happening more and more because they taking the oil out of their land, and these land becomes more desert and more like Sahara. And then when you have the sustainabilities, which is development that meet the needs of present and the future generation also. So you're not thinking of consumptions today, you also need to look at the futures, your children, how they're going to consume, how they're going to generate businesses also. Number 5, learning objective is the evolution of the Canadian business. We want to look at what's happened to how the business of Canada has happened. One of the theories saying what established the business of Canada is the mostly started when the first stage, when the US banned the alcohol, producing alcohol. So the Canadian or the American came and built breweries here. That's one of the theories. And then the Japanese and the Americans came and built a manufacturing to stop the trade between blockage between Japan and USA. Um, but there is lots of things that contributed to the evolution of Canadian businesses due to, and it's one of them due to increased efficiencies, global competitions, and improved technology. Jobs are being these days is lost in the manufacturing sector, which is replaced so partially in the services. The number of Canadian farms dropped due to the technologies, but there have been replaced by some larger farms and some small but highly specialized farms. And I said in the beginning that you would see that maybe a large farm runs in Canada by 3 people, yet the same size of the farm runs by in Bangladesh or Mexico by 100 people. Many workers who cannot find work may need to train and retraining, and this is what we see these days in Canada. There's lots of education, lots of training. Education is number one worldwide, the highest level of educated people in Canada. And further education make you to become more qualified for a new and existing jobs. Educated employee and employers makes the company more productive and efficient. So when we are looking at the percentage of different sectors of work in Canada, I think most important here, you look at it is that the fact that the service producing sectors, which is this part, is became these days in 2018 is a 79, almost 80%. So there is shifting increase, yet the manufacturing, the product the goods producing sectors is only 21%. So the more advanced as the country becomes, the more will be more services, less production, as an indication of which country is more advanced. Take a look at this and try to understand how these things it's happening. So the progress in service industries, we spoke in the early chapters about service and goods, and service provided with the support of good, and good provided with support of services. Unlike the past, the service producing sector now employs 79% of the Canada working population. Is a huge number. Technological improvement have helped the businesses reduce their workforce while increasing their efficiencies. So in the manufacturing, because of the machineries, less employees, less blue collars, and these blue collars, some of them shifted to a white collar service jobs. Um, Large manufacturing companies are outsourcing sometimes the service, creating more opportunity for service-oriented people, and women entering the workforce have also contributed to increase the demand for service such as daycares, food preparation, and household maintenance. So there is a shift is happening from goods orientation to a service orientation within Canada. So what's a service sector? There is much talk about the service sector, but a few discussions actually list what it includes. We spoke in the early, we said there is goods and there is service and there is good service behind it and there is a service for selling the good. When brought example, a product that you find it in Dollarama for $2, you buy it and you go home. And then you have the service for the doctor or lawyer or teaching, and that's a service intangible. And then we spoke about an example of a car, like a Toyota or Honda, what service is there? So we provide a better service to sell more cars. And we spoke about IBM, for example, they sell you their mainframe because they want to sell their services Or you go to a telco company, they sell you a mobile, give you a mobile because they want to sell their services. The services overall is like, it could be different issues that you might service sectors. It could be amusement or recreation services, amusement park, ice skating rinks, bowling alleys, and then you have the business services, collection agencies, windows cleaning, public relations. You have the legal services like the lawyers, paralegals, notaries, public. And then you have the education, as you're aware, the school libraries, online schools, and you have the health service like a chiropractor, nurses care, and industries. These are type of the services that might be looking at it also. So, in the summary, uh, in the learning objective one, we know that the profit is a money earned over and above the expenses. Risk is assumed in the part of pursued profit. The higher risk, the more you want a profit there, because risk is part of your operation. The second thing, we know that the stakeholders are affected by what business do, and non-NGOs or nonprofit organizations raise funds and use them to support charitable activities. We also learn about the entrepreneurs' risk time and money to start and manage a business. And we talked about the five factors of production, which is included the land, the labor, capital good, entrepreneurship, and knowledge. And we brought the sixth element of business environment, which is, we spoke about it detailed on the legal part of the business environment, the economic, the technological, we spoke about the competitive, social, and global. And also we talked about the service sectors where has been replaced by manufacturing as the principal provider of jobs, although manufacturing remains vital, important for Canada, because sometimes you might be blocked from these products, as happening today. For example, you might be, some products gets blocked, so you need to sustain your production. And this is the end of the chapter.